Hello and welcome. Today I want to share how I made a grungy junk journal using this masterboard as the cover. I already had the masterboard prepared. I covered it with matte medium and let it dry. I'm trying to recreate the journals that you see there in the picture on my iPad because I recently had someone ask me if I could make one of those for them because I had made three previously and I sold them in my Etsy shop and they were all sold out. So I said, sure, I'll make another one for you. I let her know that I would try to make it as similar to the other ones as possible, but they wouldn't be exactly the same because honestly, I don't always remember exactly how I make things. So I tried to pick out paint colors that I knew that I had used before or very similar colors. So that's what I'm doing there is trying to recreate the cover using those same paint colors. And the way I did it before was definitely by just adding a bunch of colors to the front to the paper that I was using. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. So I have been pulling out a piece of book page there to just blot some of my paint off because I'm trying to keep working on the cover without drying the cover with my heat tool so I can keep going kind of quickly. But I don't want my colors to blend too much, so I'm doing that technique there that you can see with the book page, and then I'm creating a nice piece of paper that I can use later on in another project. So I decided I needed a little more teal on the front cover because that was one of the main colors that you see in the previous journals that I made. And here I go again, adding my extra paint to that piece of book page. Next, I scribble with my charcoal pencil. I've said this many times. I like to do scribbling on my mixed media, and I usually use a charcoal pencil these days. And I pulled out the two stamps that I knew that I had used in the background before, and I do some random stamping here and there on my cover with those two stamps. I go off the page a little bit, as you can see there. I turn my stamp sideways and right side up and just, do some random stamping. There's no rhyme or reason to it, just where I think it needs some of that stamping. And I use that postage stamp too. Next, I'll use white paint with that stencil. I knew that was one of the stencils I used in the background of my previous cover, and I'm just referring to my picture again. I actually have that to the side of where I'm working all the time to make sure that I can refer to it and make sure that I'm following the example as much as possible. So I add some white with that stencil. I often like to use white and or black in backgrounds of mixed media projects that I'm working on. I think it adds a very nice touch to the background. And I also knew I had used gold in the past with some bubble wrap, so I'm just adding that gold paint to the bubble wrap and just doing a little bit here and there. I don't want to cover the whole thing with that gold bubble wrap. That's another favorite technique, using the bubble wrap. I love the way that looks. I love a bit of gold in my mixed media too, a little bit of bling. So the cover is almost finished, and now I want to make an inside paper that will be the first page of my journal. I had done this before, so again, I'm just following what I did before, and I use that reddish paper that is actually painter's paper, like you buy it at the home improvement store to lay down to cover your surfaces when you're painting. That's what I think it's mainly used for, or maybe doing other construction work. Anyway, I have a big roll of it left over from a remodeling project in the past, and so I use that paper a lot. It's a nice sturdy paper, but it's not super thick either. It's a great paper to use for mixed media, I think. So I'm trying to make a page on the inside using some of the same colors that I used on the cover, but I'm not trying to recreate the cover by any means. It's a messy page. It's not as, I'll say, finished as the front cover, but that's the way it's supposed to look. So again, I'm just trying to use the colors or similar colors that I used on the front cover, just so it kind of goes together in a way. I like to often use a little bit sturdier paper as the first page of my junk journals. Sometimes I use scrapbook paper in my nicer, like, themed journals. But in this one, it's grungy. I call it a grungy junk journal, so I'm making a grungy paper. I use the bubble wrap again, this time with black. I like the way that looks. I'm going to do some stamping also, because I just felt like it needed a little something else, with some different stamps than I used in the cover, because again, I'm not trying to recreate the cover, but just using similar techniques. So I think I'm finished with that. And now I had previously glued some fabric to the inside cover of my journal, and that's what I'm doing there. I am using my technique of not measuring and just making little cuts so that my fabric is the approximate size that I need it to be. And then I'm going to tear it. I like to see those frayed edges, and I don't mind that the fabric sticks out from the cover a little bit. In fact, I like that. So I like that look. And this is a ticking fabric, but it's a thin one. It's a very thin one, like a cotton maybe. So I know that I can use my glue stick and it'll work well with this thin fabric. So I'm going to spread a lot of glue on there to make sure that my fabric sticks well, but I also know I'm going to sew around the edges, so it's definitely going to be secure after I do the sewing, but also the glue will hold it in place nicely too. And sorry, I don't know why I sometimes choose to wear the weirdest things when I'm working on projects, and those sleeves were just constantly getting in my way. So the fabric has some wrinkles, but once you set it down and smooth it with your hands, it smooths out all the wrinkles with this type of process. And I didn't center the fabric well, go figure. And so I am adjusting it by tearing it a little bit more. And again, it's that grungy kind of journal, so the look is fine that way. So I think it looks fine. So there's my cover, and now I've pulled out some papers that I'm going to use for the inside. I can't make the inside exactly like the previous ones, again, because, all my papers that I used before were different, but I want them to be similar. So I have a variety of book pages, dictionary papers, other painted papers that I have, gel prints, things like that. So again, my technique, as you can see, of very precisely measuring my papers, I will tear that's going to be my first page of the journal. So I'll tear that one, and I know that my other papers cannot be big. Well, I don't want them to be bigger than that paper. I have made journals where I've had papers stick out over the top and bottom of my cover, but in this case, that's not what I did with the other journals. So to be true to that previous journal, I'm going to trim my pages down. And sometimes I like to, not sometimes, all the time, I like my pages to be different sizes. And I like that torn look, again, grungy. So those are the papers. I'm going to just tear them down if they need to with my ruler. And I'm just showing you that I did the sewing on my front cover and then the inside cover. And I put some washi tape on that little book page to make it a little more secure in the book. And I'm just showing you the papers that I'm going to use on the inside, what I decided to use, and also I'm trying to put them in the order that I think looks good. And this is very subjective. What I think looks good might not look great to somebody else. So you just have to do what you think looks right, and you can put them in the order you think you want them. You can, change that order up until you decide to put them in the journal. So I have pretty much figured out how I'm going to do it. Again, because this is a grungy journal, it's just got a lot of grungy papers in that don't always necessarily need to look the same. But I think I've put them in a nice order. And now I'm trying to figure out where to fit in that little book page, what the right place for it. And I finally figured that out. And then what I decided to do with this journal is to take all my pages and fold them together instead of individually. Usually I will fold the papers individually, but every once in a while I will take all my papers and especially when there's one signature, you can do this. And then I take all my papers, as you can see, I put it with my cover, and then I fold everything all together. And one of the reasons I decided to do this is because I'm going to punch holes in the spine, because I didn't bind this journal with thread. I bound it with a ribbon. So I know I'm going to punch those holes, and I figured this was a good way to fold all my papers together with the cover and then punch the holes in. You'll see how I do that in a minute. So that I'm happy with that. I have to press that down a little bit to keep it to stay down a bit, because it likes to pop back up. It's got a lot of papers inside of it. So again, paper clipping the papers to keep everything all together. I do want the holes that I punch, to be relatively straight in my spine so that I can put the ribbon through. So I paper clip them together, and then I use my crocodile to punch a hole. That is a heavy duty hole puncher. I like to use that for a lot of my journal making. Unfortunately, I was moving too quickly, not thinking, stopping to think clearly, as I sometimes fail to do, and so my holes aren't centered. But I decided to keep going because, once you punch those holes, it can be fixed, but it just makes it a little bit more challenging to try to fix. So I did contact the person that wanted this journal and told them about my non-centered ribbon, and they were fine with it. So I'm glad they were, because stuff like that doesn't really bother me too much either. But, I know everybody's different, and it might have annoyed somebody else. So I tied the ribbon in there. I decided to put the bow at the top to make it look like I meant to do it that way. And now I just need to do my cover decoration, and I will show you hopefully quickly how I do that. All right, so there's my cover decoration, and I had layered some papers, as you can see, and used that stamp with the butterflies, and I had a paper in the background that was black scrapbook paper with some white scribbled writing, but I didn't have any more of that paper, so I created my own with my Posca pen and this black paper that I think is like a construction paper. And then I stamped my butterflies taping off the bottom one because I only wanted 3 butterflies, and then don't forget to remove that tape before you stamp it. And I had to do it twice because the first time my stamp pad was a little bit dry, so I re-inked it and then stamped it again, and that came out much better. I'm using tea-dyed paper to stamp on. I love the way that looks. And then I'm going to layer with that beige paper and then the black paper with the scribbled writing on it. I'm going to glue those 3 pieces together. I eyeball everything when I glue things down, and then when I cut things too, I just eyeball it, and it usually works out well. So then I glued down my 3 pieces, and then I glue all that down to my cover. And then I'm pretty much done with the project. I'm just going to glue that down, and then I'll do a little flip through. I decided to glue it closer to the top instead of centered to match my ribbon on the spine. So that is pretty much done. I do need to flatten it just a little bit, which I do later off camera. But here's a flip through of how the inside pages look. I'm really happy with the way that turned out. I like that the papers are not all centered, and some are closer to the top or the bottom. I use tea-dyed papers, gel prints, other types of papers that I've created in the past. I actually had all these papers in my stash because that's what I do. But again, I'm very pleased with the way it turned out, and I think the person that asked me to make it is also pleased with it, so that makes me happy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.